Allen in a blizzard, won. His coach got out-coached. He won. Trevor Lawrence down 27-10 and the Cowboys defense roaring. Won. Win games. Have a better quarterback. Washington's never taken quarterback seriously. They could have hired any coach out there. They went and got a defensive coach, and now you have no identity offensively. I feel bad for you. It's why I'll say this. I mean, so Terry McLaurin is the wide receiver, and he complains that he looked at the official. He pointed the official. The official gave him a heads up. You're right. And then the minute it snapped, they have a penalty. It looked weird. I don't think anybody's out to get Washington. But I also think in that pass interference call at the end of the game, and I've been saying this for years, when you get to the end of a game, NBA, NFL, officials do not want to decide the game. They're going to let games get much more physical. And in real time, it's easy to get a freeze frame of that. But in real time, when it first happened, I'm like, they're going for the ball. I didn't see the left hand. Officials do, but by the way, they allow, you can take a freeze frame on that all day long. Officials in the NBA, they literally, we've said this for years. The reason young teams do not win in the NBA playoffs, because the longer you go in the playoffs, the more the refs swallow the whistle. That's why Karl Malone didn't get as many whistles in the playoffs, and James Harden didn't get a friendly whistle in the playoffs. You start getting to divisional round, then conference finals. It's why veteran, older NBA players, been in the weight room longer, older, stronger, tend to flourish in the playoffs, right? It's why if you look at defense in the playoffs, Golden State was a great defensive team. Milwaukee's a great defensive team. Boston's a great defensive team. Those are your three best NBA teams in the playoffs usually, right? In the last couple of years, those are your teams. They play defense. Older players, been around, physicality, Draymond Green, your Giannis, your Marcus Smarts, your Jaylen Browns. They're tough. They're physical. It's the same thing in the NBA. They swallow the whistle, and they've been doing it my whole life. You swallow the whistle. You let players win games and finesse players shrink in the playoffs the further it goes. Same in the NFL. Physical teams are going to win these playoff games. Why? Because refs are going to let more stuff go. They don't want to decide these games. They'd rather step away. I thought it was in real time, not pass interference. Then you look at the replay and say that could be pass interference. But I will say this about Washington. You butchered the quarterback position multiple times. You know, and this is why I've defended the Miami Dolphins. Even though I don't think Tua is the guy, they as an organization, you got to give the Miami Dolphins a lot of credit. The Dolphins in the offseason figured it out. They totally pivoted to offense. Mike McDaniel, Tyreek Hill, Cedric Wilson, Armstead, the left tackle. I don't love the Dolphins. I don't love Tua. But the organization said, wow, the world's changing. And they spent big money on offense. They gave up big draft capital to get offense. Washington hires a defensive coach, has a great defensive line. I mean, they have not figured out in real time as the league is changing, they're not taking care of the most important essential part. This really becomes a league of quarterbacks and coaches. Jacksonville made a move, Trevor and Peterson. Reed, Mahomes. So, Jimmy Johnson was talking about this earlier with Tua. Compared to the rest of the world, it's not terrible. Oh, we don't have it yet. Sorry.
Hey, Colin, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
So McDaniel came from San Fran. It was kind of a random hire, right? I mean, obviously he knew offense. Is Ben Johnson of the Lions, who has coached the Lions they've become a fun, exciting offense, is he going to be a head coach next season? Like if you're kicking the tires, you got maybe a defensive coach you want to run out. I think you got to give a look at this young OC in Detroit.
This was my knock on the Jets.
Yeah.
Right spot for most of the game. Do you want a guy that's capable of completing passes, or do you want a guy that can carry you to wins when your O-line is shaky, your run game isn't great, and you're making defensive mistakes? That was the classic example of what you want and what only one team has.
Where Colin was right.
Anthony Davis of the Lakers, it's a bummer. he's going to miss multiple weeks with a foot injury. I said this the last 3 weeks. I've been pleading with Lakers. Move him. Trade him. Anthony Davis fans are like crypto bros. The more you burn them, they come back and buy more. He will never remain healthy. He's a super talent. But it was so predictable what was going to happen. Now he's out for minimum 2 weeks. Many suspect much longer.
Where Colin was wrong.
Bears have lost 7 straight. I like Matt Eberflus, and it is a rebuilding team. Justin Fields, though, which I was really into early, dude gets hurt too much. He runs too much. He gets hit too much. I don't feel as optimistic about the Bears. They're really bad at receiver. Velus Jones was a bust with a 3rd pick at wide receiver. Chase Claypool was unavailable. I hope they're still bad at receiver, still rebuilding on the offensive line. I don't know what Justin Fields is. He just takes too many shots, and the Bears have lost 7 in a row.
Where Colin was right?
Zach Wilson. I know he threw for 300 yards, but I said this out of college. You can't struggle with the easy stuff. I mean, that you can't miss on those throws. He misses on easy stuff. He takes bad sacks. He's too dependent on the great play. Folks, you got to hit about 8 or 9 easy ones like Burrow does, like Mahomes does, like Herbert does. Robert Saleh didn't do a good job with clock management, but Justin Herbert's a kid. Why is he so good with clock management and Zach Wilson so bad? I never bought into him. He was Johnny Manziel with an arm. Yes, he can be spectacular. That doesn't happen very often in the National Football League.
Where Colin was right?
Finally, when USC was looking for a coach, when the Jaguars were looking for a coach, I said, somebody hire Doug Peterson, please. Every quarterback he's ever had, Trevor Lawrence, Nick Foles, Carson Wentz, has had their best years. I think this is obviously a very talented young quarterback, but man, coaching matters. And Doug, a former NFL quarterback, is patient. He's a listener. Obviously, this team was struggling early. It takes a while to change a culture. But Doug Peterson was somebody. I literally called somebody inside USC and said, would you consider Doug Peterson? It's a quarterback sport. I did. I literally called somebody and said, it was the athletic director. I said, just put him on your radar. Would you just call him? I have no power here. Just call him, please. They did pretty well. They got Lincoln Riley. So USC and Caleb Williams, they're fine. Calling right, calling wrong on a Monday. Jimmy Johnson, the Hall of Famer, is now joining us live from the Keys, Fox NFL Sunday. I will say this. I don't know if you know, you know so many of these coaches. I don't know if you know Doug Peterson, but I said this earlier, Jimmy. The hardest thing in the world is to find a star quarterback, and the second thing is to find a star coach. I don't know if you know Doug, but I think it's pretty exciting. I watch them, and I'm like, okay, is this the young kind of, I'm not saying Andy Reid here, but boy, Trevor Lawrence and Doug, it looks like it works to me, Jimmy.
Yeah, without question. I was really impressed with Trevor Lawrence. And of course, we all were excited about him coming out of college and disappointed last year. But he has come on strong here for the last couple of months and looks like he's going to be a franchise quarterback for them for a long time.
Listen, you're friends with Belichick. I understand he's lost a lot of coordinators. He lost Josh McDaniels. But, Jimmy, this sport, I said it earlier, technology and football are very fluid. They change fast. They just don't have a feel for it. Like, what do you do? Is it Mac Jones? Is it Bill? What do you see?
I think what Bill Belichick's doing right now, he's trying to make the best out of what he has, not only with his coaching staff, but also with his players, with the roster that he's got. They're not a super talented team.
No.
And some of their talent is young. And so I think he's trying to make the best of what he's got. And, a lot of people are criticizing him because of the offensive philosophy right now. But if you don't have the players on offense, what's the best way you can win? And the best way for you to win is not turn it over, not make mistakes, and play good defense. And so a lot of what he's doing is because of the talent on the roster.
It's interesting, though, Jimmy. You were really good with personnel. you were good in college. A lot of your players were 3-star guys, and you made pros. And, Zach Thomas and guys that were overlooked. Bill's a great coach. He has not had a ton of success drafting offense. Is it a fair criticism to say sometimes, Jimmy, you get too much power, and he's probably not relinquished some of the drafting power?
Well, I don't know if it's too much power. I know, when I went to the Dolphins, it was overwhelming for me because I was trying to be general manager and head coach.
Yeah.
That was my title. But during the season, with the salary cap and with free agency, I didn't have time, to see who's on the street. And with today's football, you're going to have to pick up players throughout the year. You're going to have to play rookies. You're going to have to play free agents. You're going to have to pick up players off of other teams, either with trades or people that have been released. And so you've got to have help, as far as your people in your building, and you can't do it all by yourself.
So Commanders Giants last night, people are complaining about officiating. Do you think the Washington fans had a point in terms of, the receiver looks at the official, the official says, that's not my responsibility to get you lined up. How did you interpret that?
Well, a lot of times it's just out of courtesy. If the receiver lines up and he points at the official might tell him to move up or something. But it's the receiver's responsibility to line up on the line of scrimmage. Obviously, the receiver did not feel like he was lined up right, or he wouldn't have kept looking over there. And then once they started in motion, he knew he was wrong because he wasn't lined up on the line of scrimmage.
So
and so that's the receiver's fault. But as far as the other complaints about the officiating, I always told our team, I said, you've got to be good enough to overcome bad officiating calls. There's going to be poor officiating calls in every game. And if you study the film, you're going to say, hey, there was holding here, there was holding there. That should have been interference. I told our players, don't ever, ever complain about the officiating. You be good enough to overcome bad officiating.
Okay, I've told my audience that's exactly what I think, is if it comes down to an official's call, then you couldn't put the team away. So Saturday night, you live down in Florida. And yesterday, Jimmy, I watched Trevor Lawrence, Burrow, Herbert, Mahomes, Allen on Saturday literally overcome injuries, a blizzard, bad halves, and they carried their teams to win. I'm not disputing. I mean, I look at Miami and you go play Josh Allen, and I think to myself, if I ran the Dolphins, I got to face that 2 times a year minimum. I mean, I'm sorry, Jimmy, that if you were in your division and I mean, not the guys that had to face you and Aikman,